Nicole Watts made history in January 2026 as the first woman chair of Onondaga County Legislature, presiding over the first Democratic majority in the legislature in decades. But titles only tell part of Nicole's story. This woman is a force of nature who never meets a stranger, a master fundraiser who can walk into any room and leave with both resources and relationships, and a connector who builds coalitions the way some people breathe, naturally, powerfully, and with purpose. And as the founder of HOPEPRINT, this established grassroots leader, minister, refugee advocate, and nonprofit organizer helped expand access to essential services for newly arriving families, connected residents to education advancement and work opportunities, and led by example to establish culturally inclusive support networks on Syracuse's Northside before winning her first election at 43 years old. Nicole is a bright light who shines and brings warmth to every space she enters, yet moves with the precision of someone who knows exactly what she's built for. And she'll tell you herself, she's built for this moment, this responsibility, this historic leadership. And as chair, Watts is able to build a legislative agenda and appointment committee chairs, wielding power with grace while tackling transportation inequity, homelessness, housing challenges, and impoverishment across Onondaga County. What many don't know yet is that Nicole's greatest strength isn't just her accessible, relationship-driven approach of her commitment to people-focused policies. It's her unshakable belief in possibility, her ability to see potential where others see problems, and her gift for making every person feel seen, heard, and valued. Welcome, Nicole Watts.
Thank you, Victoria.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. It's been a wild ride the last few months, but filled with, like you were just saying, some of those moments that you feel like life has made you for. So it's a good season.
That's great. That's beautiful. But we're this season, I can't reiterate enough, we're talking about mindset, we're talking about purpose, and just in the statement of understanding that you were built for this. I think a lot of people see you right now. We're in the month of May. Everything exploded for you probably and right after election, right? Between November and now May, when was that moment that you said, oh, I think I am built for this? Or was it during campaigning?
I think it was both and. I think the night of the election, I was standing out in front of one of the apartment buildings in District 9, talking with neighbors as they were walking in to vote. After spending all day knocking on doors, helping get some new American families who were new citizens out to vote, and just the beautiful thing that is our democracy. Mm-hmm. And as I was standing out in front of that building, reflecting on the day and talking to people showing up at the polls, something came over me of that this is truly about representation, and this is my community. And this community welcomed me in 16 years ago, and many became my family, non-blood, but really took care of me when I was sick, and have celebrated birthdays and been at weddings and been able to be a witness to births and care for babies. And I've just truly been able to be family with this community. And so standing there on that election day, just watching that reciprocal relationship. And then when I won, having the people with me say, we won. I think that was that moment, standing on the sidewalk late at night that night, where I knew we won. And this really is a moment of a chapter turning, but absolutely part of a continuing story. After that, when my colleagues nominated me to be chair, I think I know my experience, but not everyone does, that's kind of a space I find myself in quite often in the community, where I end up in a room and I'm just naturally a facilitator persona. And so I've been fortunate to serve in a number of different spaces and places as more of a collaborator and kind of helping teams work together to build agendas and set strategy and things like that. So the job description was a pretty natural fit as soon as I was selected for it. And yet there's a whole new level of things that come with being chair of a legislature, being an elected official in general, that, are a whole different ballgame in a lot of ways. And so navigating your way through the way that people see you, the way that people treat you, the things that people want from you, a lot of times very, very personal, deep felt needs that they are hoping that government will respond to. Yeah. It's a lot to carry. And I don't think I hope I never get used to that in the way that makes it feel like every day or disregarding, because every single day you encounter something new and crucial to try and find a way to address in this role that we've been entrusted. So I do, though, feel like in the last couple of months, as we've gotten a few months into this, that we're starting to hit our stride, and that feels exciting most of all when I get to talk to our community and say what we're doing, not just what we're thinking about doing, is a really beautiful place to be in now.
Yeah. I think that what I find most interesting of just watching your journey, right? One thing is that because being a chair has so much, pomp and circumstance to it, from a visibility standpoint, that a lot of people forget that you have a district, you're elected inside of a district. And tell us where that district sort of resides on the north side.
So I represent District 9, which is the smallest geographic area because it's the most densely populated. And it's really Syracuse's north side, essentially. It has, jagged edges, but it's essentially Erie, Boulevard, up Lodi, all the way to the northern edge of the city, kind of going around to Grant, sometimes Teal, area of the north side. And there's some pieces that are not a part of my district on the north side, but most of it is, and which is home to, as many know, a lot of resettled refugees, new Americans, and immigrants. Yeah. It's the highest concentration of folks there. And I live right in the north side, of course, in District 9, and have lived there for 16 years and have witnessed it to be a community that has some of the most constant community change. We've got very high numbers of tenants and out-of-town landlords. And so there's kind of a constant transition and change, and it's very difficult to organize the community to really sustain what it can look like for us to work together to develop that community. And so it has an uphill battle, but one that I'm excited to be a part of our community to fight in this new capacity.
Yeah, I think anybody that I talk to, when you mention different sides of town, when I was growing up, different sides of town sort of have different personalities per se, right? Or cliches. And I think the north side was always just like, whew, the north side feels different. Like it's a palpable feeling that the north side is different. And I think it's, I would say, in my opinion, just because there are so many nationalities from so many different places in the world and newly placed there, right? Not families. There are a handful of families that have been there, will tell you their story from way back in the day, but mostly folks have been there on an average less than 20 years, and so it's really hasn't even had the chance to reach its potential. So it'll be interesting to watch that sort of come to fruition over the years. The chair and the district we spoke about. And I don't want to speak on politics the whole time because I really want to speak on more so like, you're an amazing businesswoman, right? First and foremost. And we met a long time ago. I can't even remember when. I remember how we met, but I don't remember how many years ago it was. And from the time that I've met you, that's one thing that was resounding, that you're a meticulous businesswoman. Can you speak to that?
I think for me, I am a strategist at heart. I think if I were to pick, a few words to describe myself, that since I was a young child, I was always strategizing, how we got to a goal. I find a really wonderful sense of fulfillment when a collection of people that I get to work with get to accomplish something and make it to that destination. And to me, we haven't achieved it if we haven't achieved it together. And so I think that just naturally places me in spaces and places with other people who also want to achieve things. And there's no greater joy than seeing someone move from a place of dreaming to actualizing like what they want to see.
Yeah.
And so in those spaces and places, I think that's where that strategy shows up, and you make it work. And I think that is another piece that I'm grateful that I get to work with other people to say, hey, we are going to come hell or high water, make it to this destination. And sometimes that takes profound creativity in all of this. I think a lot of times when we think of business, we think of overflowing bank accounts and, having all the resources in the world. That's just not been the story necessarily that I've had in the endeavors I've been involved in. But what I have witnessed is the grit and the resource of human capital, and how when people have passion, that the possibilities can really be close to endless if they have the grit to see it through. And so, with HOPEPRINT, the organization that I was privileged to start back in 2010, we literally didn't have a bank account when we started. We had a collection of people, and we started off with just people compiling some money for rent and food out of the collection of us that were starting it off. And we would feed, 100 people dinner off of that little pot of money. And the organization itself emerged out of that passion and those people. And I think that's where the best things start. We didn't actually have a business plan, which when I coach people, I would strongly encourage them, right, to have a business plan, to have a strategic plan. But I think those things kind of emerge as you go in those early days. And then one of the beauties, if you start that way, is it keeps you responsive to the community. And so every step of the way through those years, we've pivoted over and over again to meet the needs of the people. Because if you're really being driven, your strategy is being driven by what people are longing for and needing and wanting, that doesn't stay stagnant. It shouldn't. Yeah. You're not being very successful if what the people you're serving want stays stagnant. Because if you're really participating in community change, it should be a dynamic thing. Yeah. And so shifting and changing to meet those different needs, I think is a reason why we've been able to stay around over these years, even on a relatively small budget in that front field.
Yeah. What did you want to be when you grew up?
I was actually thinking about this the other day at an icebreaker question. I thought, what did I want to be when I was a little girl? I grew up in a more conservative context where being a woman had a pretty limited scope of possibilities that were really presented to me as options. I knew I wanted to make a difference, though. And so in the narrative that I was growing up in, I saw that as being a change maker in spaces and places where people were marginalized. And that kind of came to me in a whole lot of different ways. But one of the most particular spaces was when I was 14 years old. And I went on a service trip into the inner urban core of Chicago. And I had not been given any narrative around racial inequity or just racism in general. That was not really a piece of the narrative that I had.
And for context, you were coming from Georgia?
No, I was coming from, at the time, Colorado.
Yeah,
okay. So I was living in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And it's a pretty homogenous area there. And I was in the midst of this predominantly Latino and Black community. And I just witnessed firsthand with my 14-year-old uninformed eyes, I noticed inequity and I couldn't shake it. And so that really set me on a path of really being bothered deeply by what I had seen and trying to understand where it came from and feeling unshakably compelled to be part of that, of changing that, right? So I would say that, that about that age, 14, 15, that set me on a course of I guess, what I have now come to have language around being someone who's championing equity and what it looks like for us to show up in spaces and places and understand that there is trauma and there is history and there's current trauma and current microaggressions and current cultural norms at play, and that we need to be actively participating in changing that story. Every single one of us, every single day, have to show up to that because it is never going to change. And I feel like I haven't shaken that since I was 14 years old. And it's just, I've learned some new language. I'm continuing to learn language, continuing to understand more and more of the layers that go there. But I think I wanted to be someone who changed that when I grew up.
That's in a very impressionable age, right? At 14 or 15, when you feel like everybody sort of lives this type of life and you sort of go into another place and you realize that they didn't. Like that resonated with me because I lived in the suburbs and then I would go to church inside of the city, right? Like the inner city. And it was always apparent that it was like two different worlds, right? And so trying to figure that out was interesting. So I understand what you're saying when you come from that lens. What do you want folks to know about your leadership style?
So I think the first word that always comes to mind is collaborator. Again, I don't believe you accomplish really anything successfully when you do it alone. And so working with people, sometimes people that might be unorthodox, is I believe the way that you get to any kind of goal. So I'm committed to, as much as possible, collaborating with everyone, including across the aisle, including people from different cultures, religions, backgrounds, politically or otherwise. And I think that has been a repeating truth of my life. And yet also I am a very deeply filled with convictions leader. So I know what I believe. And so I am unwilling to collaborate if it comes to the detriment of the convictions that I believe are right, most especially around human dignity and the things that we are supposed to do in this world. And so collaborator at every intersection where convictions can be upheld, I think is core to my leadership.
Yeah. So what do you do to, like, these are all like very cerebral thoughts, but more so like well thought out, like to understand yourself at that level, well thought out. Like, how do you decompress?
I love to travel.
That
is my absolute joy, just to like walk streets. I particularly love to like walk streets, ride public transit, and be just with people, not necessarily interacting with everyone, but just watching people, watching places, seeing architecture, seeing new scenery. I think just kind of helps to get you out of your own headspace and make you see the world differently. I also really love to cook. So just putting on some jazz music in my kitchen, and I'm getting lost in the art of cooking. I think those are two spaces that really bring me a lot of life.
That's great. Like, what's your favorite dish to cook?
So I love cooking bear. So one of the beautiful things about my life is that I get to be surrounded with all these cultures. And so I take a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So I really enjoy to make Ethiopian bear lamb together with like a rice that's inspired by the Iraqi culture, and just bring it all in, fusion cooking from all these beautiful cultures I get to live my life with.
Okay. How about you let me know? Or we talked about, you said you love to travel, right? Imagine somebody is, on their travel journey and they want to come to Onondaga County or Central New York. What would you tell them?
Yeah. So first of all, I am so grateful that we have really started to discover our possibility here in Onondaga County. I think when I first moved here over 20 years ago, to me, I remember calling my family and saying, it's like I'm on a movie set, because it was October, the leaves were changing and it was absolutely beautiful. And everyone I was around didn't seem to appreciate this place that we were in. And so I think that we're really starting to find ourselves in the last 10, 15 years, whether it's like creative, cool restaurants that are opening up that have chefs that are, taking that job in the art that it can be, or, cocktail bars and spaces and places that like are in nature that now are getting maximized by putting some seating in and just cleaning up shorelines and things like that. I think we have a really rich, amazing space that we get to live our lives in with the lakes and the canal and our downtown and its resurgence and its architecture. It's just all over the place. There's so much opportunity. So I continue to be hopeful that we can expand our public transportation here to really be accessible to people. I think when I go to a city, I love to just be able to get lost myself in exploring it without having to pay for an Uber everywhere that you go.
Yeah.
And I think that the opportunity for people to really have that experience of Syracuse depends a lot on things like improving our public transit. But if they are able to explore our city center, to ride along the Empire Trail we have bike share now, so they can do things like that, or walk, go and check out some of those restaurants, but then also be able to get out into the county, because there's a lot of really beautiful places, again, on the lakes and in nature that surround our city that a lot of people who live in our city don't even get to go out and witness. And I think the combination of it all makes this a really special place.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. So lastly, I like to ask folks about a quote. And I feel like I'm leaving so many great questions on the table that aren't coming to mind right now. But thank you for coming. I appreciate you taking time out to do so. Before I get to the quote, so you could be thinking about this quote, but any quote that you would like to share. But 5 years from now, where do you see, and you have insight into things that are coming here, things that are actually projects that are getting off the ground, all these things, what does Central New York look like to you, or what does Onondaga County look like to you in 5 years?
So one of the things that compelled me into going ahead and saying yes to running for office is because I have this unshakable feeling that change is coming, and it's coming faster than most of us really are internalizing right now. Part of that comes from one of the projects I was working on a couple of years ago, brought me to Austin, Texas, and Micron announcement had just come, and they said, you guys better get ready because the change is either going to happen with you or to you.
Yes.
And I felt that in my being. And I feel like every single crane that I see, every street that closes down for the 81 coming down, et cetera, it just feels like it's coming, it's happening now. And now is the moment. And if we don't figure out how to have it happen with us, it is going to happen to us. And most especially to those who are most vulnerable, who don't own their home, for an example. Some people in my neighborhood have seen their rent go up 40% in the last couple of years. That is untenable. The housing, folks who run shelters and things are saying the numbers are already skyrocketing. They're only going to continue because of just the significant impact of all the things kind of converging on us. And so I don't mean that in a fear way, though. You said earlier, I think we can see those problems and just be like, what in the world are we going to do? I think we should see it as a responsibility. And every chance I get, I keep saying, hey guys, wake up, because this change either happens with us or it happens to us. And no, the moment is not next year. The moment is not when Fab 1 opens. The moment is now. It was actually yesterday, and we have some catching up to do. So I think housing is, for me, one of the absolute top priorities. And I don't think we can separate that from transportation, because we're talking about a region. And again, our region is only so connected because of the way that our public transportation is set up. And so we need to make sure that we are having not only housing for all different socioeconomic groups, but that it is accessible to people with all different lifestyles and realities, regarding whether it has to do with ADA accessibility, or it has to do with folks who can't afford to have a car, or families who want to live with no car and ride bikes and walk places. We really need to be creating spaces and places for that to happen. The good news is that they say that we need 3,800 new units a year for the next 10 years approximately to be built.
That number is crazy.
And it is completely
3,800.
crazy. And our permits historically have been, more in the realm of like the 700 range from what I understand. And so that's an astronomical growth. So overwhelming, daunting number, but also a number that if in fact those numbers are true and they're well studied, that means we have the market to support that. So when we're building that new housing, let's do it really intentionally, again, with us. Like, where do we want to live? What kind of homes do we want to see?
Right.
What amenities do we want to have accessible? Do we want to have multifamily, do we want condo options? Does everyone want their own kind of yard with a fence, et cetera, anymore? Or do they want to live where they can walk and bike for their everyday life in villages and cities across our area? So there is a lot of opportunity here, but there's also a lot of vulnerability. And so I think we need to hold those two things in tension every day. And it's going to take all of us. We can't, really no one can sit on the sidelines in this endeavor, or we'll get left behind. And so we all need to be participating in our unique sectors and ways and relationships and networks to make sure that we're all showing up to this opportunity so it does in fact happen with us, not to us.
Yeah, no, I agree 1,000%. I think just to speak to the what for many may be an elephant in a room of decades and decades of false promises in communities that are most vulnerable has sort of rocked them to sleep, right, when it comes to engagement. And so listen to this as your wake-up call of knock, knock, this is not a drill.
No.
Right? This is not a drill. And if you go outside and you see the cranes and you feel like, oh, Syracuse, I could get somewhere in 5 minutes and now I have to prepare for a good 15-minute, whatever the case may be, that if you don't believe what is being said because of historical trauma, right, believe in what you feel, right? Let your heart be your guide when it comes to an internal knowing that something is shifting. Even if it's just your rent and the gas, right?
Yes.
Something is shifting and it's palpable. And how can you engage yourself in a way that you are, part of the team that shifts instead of the crew that gets shifted, should I say?
There are decisions being made.
Absolutely.
And people need to show up at those tables. So the way that our government is set up, we have to have public hearings. Like, it's part of the process is to have these public hearings. And I know like sometimes public hearings can be a little like sitting and listening to a whole bunch of people go up to a microphone and say something, might not be everyone's jam, but it is part of our democratic process for us to host these things. And you know how many times people show up to public hearings? So incredibly rarely. It is a very common thing for there to be no one showing up at a public hearing. There should not be any public hearings happening in our community right now that don't have at least a few voices showing up in them. Because if no voices are showing up, what you're communicating to your elected officials is that you don't care, right? And that's what we are doing as a community when we're not showing up in those spaces. And I know it's not true. Right. So we as government need to improve to have public hearings accessible times and places.
Say that. Yep.
And then when we do that, we need the public to show up in those spaces and those places to actually show the government this is worth doing. We will show up if you can create those spaces for us, like at a off hours or in a place in the community that's on the bus route, et cetera. Like, we really need to work harder on that. But when that happens, when those spaces are there, the community needs to show up so that voices are actually heard, because then decisions are made based on what gets said or not said. And so if we're not participating in those spaces and those places, then a lot is going to happen for all of us that we wake up one day and go, well, I didn't get to weigh in on that. Well, maybe we just missed the legal notice that happened in the paper that nobody put on social media. And so therefore we just never saw it. And so I think all of us continuing to make one another aware of those opportunities for them to be more accessible, for us to show up, to be ready for our voice to be heard, and show up in social spaces and places, interact with us. We are elected representatives of the people. when those of us who are in that position. And so if we aren't listening, then we're not doing our jobs.
Right.
And so I hope that we can work together towards really collaborating in all these decisions that are coming down the pike. And if you are one of those people who've been traumatized, I've said this multiple times to our economic development department at the county, and when they lament some of the fear that's in our community around this development, remind them, like, we're a traumatized place. Like, we have had multiple iterations of people telling us that, don't worry, your water's fine, and Honeywell happened to Onondaga Lake. That Destiny is going to bring all kinds of amazing economic boom to the Northside, where I live. People came in, speculators bought up the housing, and that did not happen in the way that they were expecting it. And so now owners of properties are not showing up in their responsibilities, and it's impacting residents in a huge way. And many people point to that it was this one business, right? And now we all know that there's lots of factors that happen in these scenarios, but people are traumatized by those things. By 81, when it was built, now it's coming down.
Right.
How is that actually going to play out to not be another chapter in the same story and land grab? Like, there's so many things going on, and in change, the people who plan are the ones who show up to the party first. Yeah. And that is who gets to write the story. And so if we do not, again, there are people who've been planning this change for decades. What we are seeing now, they've already been at the tables. They've already been participating. And so if we continue to sit back and see how it goes, we already have missed the boat. And so we need to make sure we're showing up in the spaces that are made available to not get left behind, but again, have it happen with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, I will also say that I have seen a tiny bit of change when it comes to whether it's city or county, making sure that these public hearing meetings are at noon when, folks that are most impacted are probably at work and they need to be at work to get their hours or whatever the case may be, but at 5 or 6 o'clock at night, so can't discount that. But what's your quote?
So the quote that I've really been thinking a lot about this year so far is make haste slowly, or otherwise said, make haste deliberately. I think a lot of times when we are facing so much that needs to be done, you can be in a hurry to do it. We do need to see change happen in a quick way. Again, we're already behind the 8 ball in a whole lot of ways. But if we are in a rush, it's very easy not to do things wisely. And so I think that
Say that again.
If we're in a rush, it's very easy to not do things wisely.
Yes.
Right? And so that make haste slowly or make haste deliberately, I think is, I keep on saying I'm going to get it sketched on my wall so that I can just keep remembering when the pressure is on, that it is just as important as ever to make sure that wisdom is guiding the way, that we are doing the things that are what are truly best, not just in the short term, but in the long term, because the decisions we're making today are going to 1,000% impact a decade or a couple decades from now.
Absolutely. Chairwoman Watts, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yes.